Right, hello everyone. This is the panel When and How to Go Wide for the Right Hive Conference. I am Jane Moorcroft. I've worked as a journalist for many years. I am a massive sci-fi fan, and I have just completed I would say, an urban fantasy book, which I'm currently submitting out to agents. So we'll see what happens with that one. Watch this space. But I am very excited to be presenting some fantastic authors who are going to discuss the perils of and positives of self-publishing. So with me today we have, in order of clockwise for me, Zelda Knight. We have Rick Parker, Tao Wong, and Mel Eaden. And I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves briefly before we go into the topic. So would you like to start, Zelda?
Sure. Hello, everyone. As Jane said, I'm Zelda Knight. I'm a romance author, award-winning editor of Black speculative fiction, and I also sell books online. It's really nice to meet you and be here for Right Hive 2, and also on my second conference for the second year.
Great stuff. And so now we're going on to Rick.
Hey, R.L. Parker, or Rick. I am an epic fantasy, dark fantasy author, and I've been self-publishing since 2021.
Tao, on to you.
Hi, my name's Tao Wong. I write a lit RPG and xianxia, so Chinese fantasy, as you can probably see from my cover. And I have been publishing since 2017. I have books both wide and in Amazon, paperbacks, hardcovers, audiobooks, pretty much everything that you can guess.
Great, thank you. And on to Mel.
Hi, ML Eden or Mel. I think I'm the newbie of the group. I started in web serials originally back in 2019, 2020, and then converted to publishing and started publishing July of last year. So I haven't even gotten through a whole year yet. And I have 5 books out. One of them is on KU. My novella is on KU. But the rest of them are wide and have had some pretty good success, but a lot of working around all of that. But yeah, and you can find me at mleden.com, and all of my socials and all of the infos are there.
Thank you very much, Mel. Just to specify for all the newbies to this area, KU is, I'm presuming, Kindle Unlimited. Is that right?
All right. Yeah. Yeah.
No, because trust me, I'll be joining the beginners in this discussion, but it's fascinating. So I think that the first question I'd like to pitch, which is the most obvious one, especially for those coming into this panel that have no idea what we're discussing here, we're not discussing the width of an area. We are discussing self-publishing, and when you need to diversify how you publish in order to have an impact. That's my understanding. So who would like to start off with when they think, well, who would like to define that in their own words? Who has more experience than me?
I think for me, wide distribution and wide as a strategy is really about having multiple income streams. Just not just being wide as in being reliant and doing exclusive through Kindle Unlimited, though that's the most common discussion. If you have an ebook in Amazon and you join the Kindle Unlimited program, which is on the back end called Kindle Select, you can't have your ebook anywhere else. But for me, being wide also means being non-exclusive and having multiple income streams from all the different options that you have, whether it's audiobooks, print and paperback, hardcovers, Patreon, and all of those.
Yeah, and there's also, the decision point for a lot of people is whether or not you want to be KU. That's a completely different marketing strategy. It's a completely different list of readers that read in KU. There are people that will never pay for a book that only read in KU, and there are people that prefer to own it. There are people that prefer to purchase from Barnes and Noble, for example. They have the Nook. They don't have a Kindle. If you've got friends and family that read, some of them will be, I want to read on my iPhone. I want to read off Google Play. So you have to decide what's right for you based on what you're prepared to do for marketing, and what type of audience you're trying to reach. Also, you should look at, based on your genre, whether or not that genre does well in KU or does well in Kobo Plus or these other free reading platforms. And because if you try and fight those trends, you're just setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment.
So you've raised a lot of interesting points there, which I think we should definitely circle back to with regards to the different platforms that are available. I think that kind of gently nudges us into what I would propose as a second question, which is what is when to not go wide. And I'm presuming here it's just to stick with Amazon, but let's discuss this. So perhaps I can put that question to you, Zelda.
Can you rephrase the question? Sorry.
Yeah. So what does it mean to not go wide? I know that's a double negative, so excuse me, but how do you interpret that?
Yeah, so for me, I'm a mix of what Tao said and also Kindle Unlimited. For most indies, the concept of going wide means leaving Kindle Unlimited because, for example, and this is hard for a lot of people to imagine, Kindle Unlimited is not even 10 years old. It was a time where there was no choice but to go wide. But once Kindle Limited came around, it opened a lot of doors for indies to receive money and, make money doing this thing called indie publishing. So with that kind of history in the background, going wide for most authors means leaving Kindle Unlimited, not taking your ebooks out. But I would say, kind of what Tao says is that's kind of a conflicted way of thinking about it because, for example, your paperbacks at any time can go wide, technically, right? You can go wide with a lot of different things. You can start serializing on Radish and Kindle Vella and some other platforms. You can, take Audible is the audiobook version of Kindle Limited in a sense. You could take your audiobooks wide. So there's a lot of different ways to, in my opinion, go wide. So this very narrow focus on is your ebook in Kindle Unlimited or is it not?
Right. Okay. And what does everyone else think about that? Tao?
Whether or not you should go wide, or when. I think Rick, right, was hit it on the tip of the head where it's really a question about genre in a lot of cases and what will make you the most money. A lot of that will depend on genre and the length of the books that you're writing as well. I write 40,000 and 60,000 word books sometimes, and I write a lot of shorts. It makes no sense to put any of that into Kindle Unlimited because I literally earn like 10 cents for a short. I will never cover my costs of even just editing and covers if I was in Kindle Unlimited. So some of this will depend on what you're writing, what genre you're writing in, and how much energy and time you have to go deal with all the other retailers, because that's a big thing as well. Adding new products and adding new items to all of the retailers takes time. If you are updating back matter all the time, that takes time. The other thing, and this is a more strategic consideration for me, is I find when you are wide, your income is a little more consistent than Kindle Unlimited. Kindle Unlimited goes up and it comes down really fast. So you see very heavy launch strategies built around that first 30 days, that next 60 and 90 days. And then after that, you see this huge drop off. Wide income, for me at least, is much more consistent.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. Okay. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to that point before we move on?
I would. The other thing is that, and I talked just as a brief aside, I run a server supporting authors. We have hundreds of authors there. A lot of my Twitter and TikTok and Facebook conversations are with other authors, and comparing notes across everybody that I've spoken to. Kindle Unlimited reads also do not necessarily translate to book sales. So because it is that different audience. And the thing that people that have had success on KU find is that it's really the biggest boost is getting that first 30 days of boosts in reviews and that big spike to hit the Amazon algorithm. And the general recommendation is if you want to go wide, go KU first for a couple of weeks and then take it off of KU and let people start buying the copies once you hit 40 or 50 reviews, if you can hit that mark. But then again, that's like Tao was saying, that's specialized marketing to pull that kind of thing off. And because you're targeting a completely different audience than you would for just, hey, go pick up my book at Barnes and Noble. Hey, go pick me up at Walmart or whatever. They're different readers.
Yeah, it's a whole other world. Melissa, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I knew my genre, which is actually queer monster romance. And the main part, monster romance in general, is on KU. A lot of it is on KU. A lot of people still sell print copies, are still pretty popular with a lot of people, but it tends to be pretty exclusively to KU and Amazon. My concern, and this is something else you have to consider too, not just the marketing, was exclusivity and rights. Because what I was also seeing was that a lot of authors that had put like everything into KU getting nerfed by something in their books, by reviews, by something. And since I was already on web serial platforms and most of the books are in kind of a semi-edited second draft version on those platforms, and I didn't want to take them down to publish, I had concerns that KU might get it in their head that was competing with their ebooks or something else. So I purposely went wide. I have one novella that I took down from one of my web serial platforms that I put in KU as kind of like a binder, because it has references to my other books. So it's been a slower build. It's been a slower audience build than it would have been if I had gone all in on KU. But I think for my peace of mind, and this might be a consideration for a lot of people, and for me it certainly was peace of mind in knowing that I actually controlled where my books were, how, what I was doing with them,
Yeah.
and whether or not, KU was going to be, a benevolent entity on my behalf.
Can I add on to that real briefly? The other concern that's definitely more prevalent these days, especially if you browse TikTok, Book Talk, you'll hear a lot of people talking about this, is when your book is on KU, it's far easier for non-savory people to take copies and then repost them somewhere else. And if Amazon detects that your book has been pirated, then they can take you offline and ban your account. And that has happened to hundreds of people this year.
My goodness. Wow.
I'd also
terrible.
add, on top of that, sorry, jumping off, is that you're looking at where your audiences are in terms of geography. I would assume that to some extent you're seeing a lot of people, ML is seeing a lot of people who are reading outside of North America, the US specifically. A lot of times when you're looking at Kindle Unlimited payouts and the number that people are talking about, 0.004, which was the most recent payout, that's only the US dollars. Other countries have KU Kindle Select programs, but the payouts are significantly less in many cases. India, I think I heard they pay $22 US a year. So that's how much they pay for the whole year. So obviously your payout from Kindle Select in India is going to be significantly lower. And Google Play in particular is a very global channel. And so if you've got a lot of readers who on a global basis, if your writing touches people on a global basis, you're going to find, or you could find, that you're much more successful using some of these other channels.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, Tao. I actually, I think I may have mentioned this to you all earlier, but I did actually speak to Orna Ross of the Alliance of Independent Authors in the UK. And one of the points that they raised in Europe, at least, America, I'm guessing it's different, is that there are some countries where, Amazon or Kindle or however you want to define it, they're not the dominant publishing platforms that are used. Apparently, I can't remember which one was mentioned for Germany, but they have a different platform that they use there. So there are different payouts, but there's also different dominance in different countries depending where you are. I mean, in the US, obviously, it's Amazon, but yeah, in other countries it could be other platforms. So I don't know if anyone else knows much about that, but that's something perhaps interesting to talk about later. Okay, so you've already touched on this, but we've spoken a bit about genre and how that plays a role in when you should go wide in self-publishing. Would anyone like to discuss that a bit further? Melissa, perhaps you raised that point already with your gothic monster romance. Is that correct? Have I got that right?
Yeah, queer monster romance. So
Sorry.
yeah, it's yeah, genre is a tricky thing because so there's romance, and then there's monster romance, and then queer monster romance, and then there's like and then there's contemporary and epic. So there's like flavors of that too, right? So doing my research, after I developed my stories, I went and did some research on who was actually publishing, and who was sort of a dominant name in that space, dominant authors in that space. And strangely enough, it's very much like women, and it's not even queer monster romance, but more just regular hetero romance. They just put a monster in there instead of like, so and I find that also it depends on like, and this might not concern people that aren't doing romance, but level of heat. Like you can, like the one rule is you have an HEA, but like the level of heat tends to be, everybody is very subjective on that. And the way I write, and especially because I started with web serials tend to be like all in, and I'm very much that kind of writer. So my books tend to have more of an audience internationally, actually. And I think that's due to the web serial audience is very international. Most of the platforms are in East Asia. So a lot of the readership tends to come from that direction, and then go into Europe and then the United States, because web serials are actually fairly new concept to the US, where they've been around for a long time. So a lot of my readership actually comes from the UK, Germany, Australia. I do have a pretty good footprint in the US, but that's recent. Yeah, I think you really have to consider like where you're coming from, who, if you're starting an audience from scratch, if you don't have, like, I have a web serial audience, so it was very easy to sort of like, it didn't quite translate, but a lot of folks followed me into publication, and then build from there, and then look for your different audiences and how you can collaborate with other writers, and find pockets of other people that are not only writing monster romance but are also queer and writing monster romance, which is it's taken me almost a year to do that, because it wasn't very prevalent, and it wasn't very, it's still a merging genre, I think. So yeah, you have that concern too, is that geographical and then emerging genre popularity, and then how do you navigate something that doesn't really have a blazed trail yet? So that's kind of where I'm coming from in that situation too, which was another factor in going wide, because I was like, well, I'm already kind of out there, so I might as well just do this in the way I feel like I can better control what platforms I'm on, who has reached my books, and who has access. Because the other thing is, the web serials I have up are free. They're not edited. They don't have the polish. But if people see me talking about my books, I always indicate these are edited. I've spent money on them to make them, you know, better quality, but they can always go to the web platform. And I think that's also lend itself to not having a lot of people pirate my books either. So so that's been a nice, but I've also gotten a nice bump on the web serials because of just publishing. So people still have access to the material on some level, which I enjoy as an author, that's available, and everybody might not be going for that. And so yeah, so it does make a difference, like what you're trying to accomplish. I think what your goals are.
Yeah.
So.
And how about you, Zelda? Do you find that your subject matter, your genre is pushing you in a certain direction in terms of self-publishing, or do you think it doesn't make much difference? It's more of a cool analysis of the profit and the marketability. How do you see your genre impacting on that?
Yeah, so similar to Mel, I'm a romance author, but I write in different subgenres of romance, of which there's hundreds, literally. And so I will say it's kind of this touch and go. I have found for me, the more niche the genre, the harder it is to take it wide. However, the more profit I have found putting it in KU. The broader the genre, the harder to build an audience, but the easier to make sustained wide income. And I don't have any numbers for that, but for example, or reasons behind that, but for example, I write in two very niche genres, one being harem romance, which is one man and multiple women, and also Omegaverse, but a version of Omegaverse where it's two females. If you don't know what Omegaverse is, go read the article. you're in for a surprise. But Omegaverse is already niche. Lesbian Omegaverse is basically non-existent. There's like two authors publishing, me and this other person. And it is super, super niche. These are like, harem is actually much bigger now, but like 4 years ago, like no one was publishing harem. Like the people that published 4 years ago literally made millions of dollars. And there are two genres that are very, very KU dependent. Don't know why, but my thought behind it is because your audience is already so niche with these two genres. They're not the type of people that are going to browse Kobo and see this pop up on a recommended list. So they're very KU dependent. Whereas my other and I hate to use the term mainstream, but technically more mainstream romance, not even like the Hallmark variety, just mainstream high heat romance. It is hard because you have to invest in ads. As RL was talking before we did this TikTok, you got to do a lot of marketing to get a foothold. But once you do, there is, hundreds of thousands of readers that like Christian Grey style BDSM billionaire romance, right? It is pretty easy. Pick any suburb in America, you could probably find somebody that will read your book. It is much harder to find someone that wants to read about lesbian vampires. It's much harder to read, find somebody that wants to read about some man portal fantasy to a world of harem of beautiful women, right? It is just harder to find that audience. And so I think depending on how niche you want to write, that is really the deciding factor, at least for me, when it comes to going wide or not. That said, everything doesn't have to be all in. I don't like this black and white mentality. I have stuff that is in KU, but most of my catalog is actually wide right now, right? So it just really depends on what's best for you as an author.
It's interesting what you say, because that actually seems to be almost the opposite of what one of the authors I spoke to prior to this panel, a lady called Claire Liddon, and she's the author of best-selling contemporary lesbian romance in the UK. And she actually says that her genre very much lends itself to indie bookstores, and that's where they sell. In the UK, though, this is the UK, so it could be different, huh?
No, and I will say that's the thing though, genre. She's writing lesbian romance, but she's writing contemporary lesbian romance. Contemporary lesbian romance, there are gay bookstores out there. Like I have one in Salt Lake City that sells exclusively LGBT books. If I wrote a contemporary lesbian romance, I could probably pitch that to them. Much harder to do monster lesbians. The more niche you get, the harder it is to find an audience that's just gonna like pick that up at a bookstore.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
To add on to that, like I have bisexual, polyamory, vampire, romance, adventure mystery, that came out 6 months ago. It's done very well in my local bookstore that is very LGBTQ friendly. It has not done very well online at all. I still haven't quite figured out why. But it's a lot of local and LGBTQ. When I have a physical book, they're very much like, "Thank you," and then and so I've had a lot of local sales to the community, and that I think it's weird how that happens. Like you'll just have like it'll be very successful locally or very successful in a bookstore as a physical thing, and kind of not do a whole lot online because people, either can't find it. I think it's mostly because there aren't a lot of tags around different identities. Like they just either put it in gay or lesbian or LGBTQ. Like, so bisexuals sort of get lost in that, but but that's a whole other problem. But yeah, I think but that is also something to look at, is like how you tag your books too can actually be whether or not you go wide or keep to a particular platform. Because I know Kobo recently did Kobo Plus in the US, and I joined Kobo Plus. All my books are in Kobo Plus because there isn't an exclusivity contract. So for me, I'm like, if you want to go read my book, here's another opportunity to do it on a subscription-based model. But I like that because I don't have to have it exclusive to that model. And so that was another consideration for me. But I also know those platforms are very popular in Canada and the UK. So, it's just, it's trial and error sometimes, trying to figure out, is this the right platform? Is this the right, am I tagging it correctly? Because that all leads to, where things go. It's not as easy as it used to be, just kind of like throw it on a platform and yeah.
Gosh. So I wanted to chime in on something that it was one of you said, maybe both of you. You have to feel out what's right for you. So while we're sitting here talking about when to go wide and how to go wide, that's genre dependent. There's no perfect answer that's going to work for every author. That is not a thing. You can't sit here and listen to me go, "Oh, I'm epic fantasy and I went wide from day one," which I did, and believe that that's the way that you have to do it if it's epic fantasy. Some epic fantasy authors are going to do phenomenal on KU, and others with an almost identical book are going to get no reads on KU. You can run the same advertising campaign. It won't matter. A lot of it has to do with the luck in the market and the day that you put your videos up and when you do your advertising and who sees it and what mood they're in. You can't control when all that happens. All you can do is try and do the right thing, watch your numbers and adjust and tweak until you find that magic solution that works for you. That may be wide, that may be Kindle Select, it may be dedicating it to exclusive Barnes and Noble. I know authors that do that and do phenomenal. So you have to find the right system for you. And fortunately, a lot of these are free to get into and don't cost a ton of money. But there will be some money involved if you're running advertisements and paying for cover art and paying an editor and everything else.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump on when we're talking about accessibility and everything else. Having, Zelda and Mel both mentioned, physical books in there, audiobooks are another major area of accessibility. But even within ebooks, if you are in Kindle Select, you are not available in libraries as well. So that can be a big consideration for some people. I know some authors who do really well. They get a Kirkus review, they go out of their way, they get themselves a Kirkus review, they get starred, they get, a huge push, and they get dumped into libraries and schools and everything. And that can be thousands of sales, and they do really well. Being wide also gives you a lot of options, like Rick said, about figuring out what works for you, whether it's doing a Kickstarter beforehand to go and generate money to cover your costs, having a Patreon running for writing your new books coming in, having a YouTube a YouTube channel where you've got videos, audiobooks videos running for it, and you're getting paid via ads that way. Wide allows you all of those options. And, we're talking a lot about ebook and Kindle Select because that's the easiest way. And that's what most people do. I do want to remind people that you can always look at other channels, other products, and how you can play with them because you might find your audience that way.
Yeah.
One quick recommendation before we move on. When you're going to play with these markets and jump in and out of different exclusivity or non-exclusivity or going wide with an ebook only or maybe going wide with your paperback only, highly, highly, highly recommend you save up some money and buy your own ISBN code so that you can use the same ISBN code pretty much everywhere. The only company that doesn't let you share an ISBN for a format is Barnes & Noble. They require theirs to be exclusive to them. However, you can put your paperback, if you have your ISBN for your paperback, you can put it on Amazon. You can put the same one on Ingram Spark. You can go and take the same one direct to other stores and other printing services. You can go say, hey, I'm not going to let people buy through this, but I'm going to use this printing house I found in China that's going to print my books for $2.90 a copy and use the same ISBN to print a barcode on the back. And if you use the free ISBNs, you are exclusive to that format to them for that ISBN code. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, so it's a lot of information to take in here, isn't it? And this kind of leads me on to my next question, unless anyone has anything else they want to add to that point. No. So how long would you say it took you all to really get to grips with the market? I know, Melissa, you said you were quite new in, is that right? So, I mean, do you think you've got to grips yet? And everyone else, how long do you think it's taken you to, I mean, these little tricks about the ISBN codes and all these things, there's a lot to take in. So I'm interested to find out how long you would say. Should we start with you, Rick, given that you were just talking about the codes?
Sure. Yeah. No, so when I was writing my debut in 2020, I stopped halfway through because I was having minor panic attacks because I hit a word count that pushed me out of the range of any trad pub. My debut novel is 225,000 words. And it's book one of a series of 5. So it's not like I could break it up and make it smaller. And most trad pub for epic fantasy, they're only going to accept up to 120 for a blind submission and 150 if they know who you are, but haven't published you yet. So I was like, yeah, I got to find a solution for this. I took an entire month and did nothing but research on where to publish, how to publish. I talked to authors that were trad pub. I talked to authors that were indie. I talked to authors that were indie, went trad, and went back to indie. And I just kind of compared notes between all of them and tried to figure out what I was doing. I found out where to get my ISBN codes, Bowker Industries. I found out where to, all these different places that did publishing. I chose Ingram Spark because the more I did research, the more I realized that companies like Barnes & Noble and Amazon at that time were printing their books through Ingram Spark. They weren't printing their own copies. And I'm like, why would I use a middleman? Why not go straight to the source? Okay. And then I found out most publishing houses use Ingram, which is the big business side of Ingram Spark. So I made my decisions based on all those things and all those conversations. But it was a whole month of nothing but research. I wasn't posting on socials. I wasn't writing. I wasn't editing. I wasn't doing anything for my book other than research. And then once I had my ducks in a row, my brain was finally satisfied and I could go back to writing. But that, there's going to be a learning curve and it's always changing. When I started with Ingram, it was $50 just to upload my documents. And if I had a correction, it was another 25. Oh, another correction, another 25. Got to change my barcode, another 25. Over and over and over. I'd probably spent $500 just on uploads on my first book before it ever even hit a bookshelf. That's free now. They don't charge for that anymore, right? So the industry is constantly changing. And so there is no case, I don't believe, anybody that says they're an expert.
But a month to me, to my mind, sounds quite fast. I don't know. What does everyone else think?
No, I think that makes sense because you can. I mean, the industry is almost changing from month to month now, especially like after effect of pandemic, not necessarily post because we're not that far yet. But the after effect, I think, of the pandemic is just a lot of industry change. And publishing isn't the only industry going through this, but it's very apparent and it's very in our faces because publishing uses a lot of social. So we see it more often, I think, and a lot of us that are tuned into it, Ingram going free for certain things, and then there's like other little fees off to the side, and then who's publishing with Ingram, like Draft to Digital does their print copies with Ingram. Amazon only recently started doing their own print houses. So that is all recent. That's like within the last 6 months, right? So it's gotten really interesting to try to figure out what's where and who's doing what. And for me, I actually had a local author group that's really helped me, Inclusive Romance Project, and that's run by Karma Kelly. It's an international group based out of Texas here, and they're also an author, and they also wanted to make sure, and it was kind of after RWA imploded, that Romance Writers of America, sorry, I use the acronyms too many. That's my techie like acronym problem. But Inclusive Romance Project, we talk about all these things quite a bit. And then what came out of it was, we were talking about, well, if we want to go wide, ISBNs, how do we do that? Because another interesting thing, if you live in Canada, you don't have to pay for ISBNs. They're free. So, so finding that out as a US person, it was like, yeah, so it can get really expensive really fast. And so then, we developed cooperatives. Somebody bought a pack, and then we've been buying them off of that person for like $20 an ISBN. So it's a little bit cheaper. So it's something I would suggest too. Like if you can get somebody that just wants to just start up like a little side business publishing house and independent, so that you can have that freedom to not have to use each platform's like particular ISBN, because that does limit somebody. When you're on Amazon, you use their number, you can't take that anywhere else. Like that's just Amazon's. Or Ingram, same, I don't know quite, but I think Ingram, same difference. If you're on Ingram's platform, they could distribute it for you to other platforms, but that's their ISBN. So that was another, it's just another consideration. It's like how much money you're going to put in, how much can you invest, who can you do cooperatives with to help you out. That is just as important as trying to find like the right cover and the right editor and the right, get the right tone for the story and the right place to put it. So there's just a lot of moving parts. And if you're doing it all yourself, it's like, 5 or 6
note,
hats.
free Amazon ISBNs, bookstores won't even use them. They will not even order your books. So while they have that go wide option, when you're publishing through Amazon, it means nothing.
I'm going to add something with regard to information and information overload. There is a Facebook group called Wide for the Win, and it is basically a whole bunch of authors talking about all of these intricate details that you need to know. And they have a FAQ session, which will give you a quick rundown of everything that you really need to know for, going wide. They also have, you can always post the questions, and there's lots and lots of people who have probably asked the very same question to you. So you can just run a search and find it. Or if it's not answered, you can ask, and somebody probably has run into that same problem. The thing about going wide is that you do want to take things in steps, right? You don't want to try to throw everything at once in a place there, because you've got so many options. You've got ebook and whether or not in Kindle Select or not, for going out into other various retailers. Trying to figure out how to use each of those retailers well can take up to, for me, it took 9 to 12 months before I started generating a decent amount of income from wide retailers, so it's the long game. And that was a lot of figuring out how to market to these various retailers, how to make money doing it, what's the best way of doing it. For me, it ended up being a perma-free book one. for Wide with a series that was 9 books long. So that's how I generate a lot of my Wide income for that series specifically. But then you've got audiobooks too. You can be exclusive with ACX, which it puts you in Audible and iTunes, or you can go wide with them, which means that you drop by 15% on your income, but then on your royalty. So rather than 40% royalties, you're getting 25%. So that's another question, and all the ways that you can go wide that way. You've got translations where, Tolino, which is a German retailer, and that's just German, that's all the different ones. So each of these things add in products and YouTube and merchandise if you want, and Patreon. There's a ton. You can't, it's never ending if you start looking at it. So taking everything one step at a time will get you where you need to go. Don't try to throw too much on it. Especially as an author, your job is to write. That's where most of your money comes from.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And this Facebook group is called Wide to Win.
Wide for the win.
Wide for the win. Beg your pardon. Okay, that's really useful. Zelda, do you want to add anything to that?
The only thing I wanted to add is if you're coming from, because I'm kind of a non-traditional path, I'm kind of in a sense a newbie like Mel, even though I've been involved with the book industry for almost 10 years. I was originally an editor and running a small press, right? So I wasn't publishing my own books, but I've seen the transition of the Kindle surge, whole retailers come in collapsing, like Borders, which was like Barnes and Noble's competitor here in the United States, collapsing. So just losing one of the big venues and just a lot of stuff. And I worked, my main source of income is actually traditionally published an edited anthology called Africa Risen. So my words are really was just me publishing for fun, to be honest. But if you're coming from like a non-traditional background, I think the great thing about going wide now is, like everyone's saying, the resources are there, right? Even like 7 years ago, trying to just hunt down how to format your book was a nightmare. It was CreateSpace was still around, which was the predecessor to KDP's new system. Was a nightmare to use, in my opinion. It was a lot of stuff that was antiquated, hard. The information was just not out there. And while you can suffer from information overload, in a sense, like any question you have, you probably can find it now. You don't have to blaze the trail. You can just go, how do you get your books here? Oh, go to Drafted Digital, go to this, blah, blah, blah. So I think if you're wanting to go wide now, this is the time because you have the information in your hands. It's not you just kind of going off solo. Well, every other group, and I'm telling you, every Facebook group was going KU, going KU, going KU, not 4 years ago. So it's really cool for headspaces like Wild for the Win and other platforms leading the way.
Yeah, I mean,
make sure you find. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Make sure you find an author who is doing what you want to do and ask them to help you and coach you. We all, especially SNBs, we love helping each other. This is not a competition. Somebody can buy all of our books all on the same day. There's nothing that prevents them from doing that. Liking my book doesn't mean they won't like Tao's or Zelda's or Mel's. So there's no reason for us to be cutthroat and hold each other back. I say that because there are too many options. There's too many sources of information these days. It's almost too easy to publish and go wide. So make sure you talk to people that have done it and been through it and let them help you get your ducks in a row before you pull the trigger.
Yeah, and you've kind of led me very neatly onto the next question, which was going to be actually, but you've all mentioned it, how you lean on other people and you get advice in order to try to figure out, navigate your first steps. Taz mentioned the Facebook group, you've mentioned leaning on other authors, Rick, Zelda, you've mentioned it, you've all mentioned how you've kind of reached out and figured out your baby steps. I think in the UK, we've got various different alliances that help you. I'm guessing that in the US, you'll also have those particular organizations. But even just something like a Facebook group where you can go on and do your frequently asked questions is probably very, very useful so you actually have an idea of what you need to start looking for. But I mean, just to take it back a step, you've probably already answered this in your responses, but let's just name some of those platforms for those people that are starting out that don't know anything about the industry. Let's just name some of these best platforms for wide publication in the US, at least, or in Canada, or wherever your areas of expertise lie, just so that we can the people watching this can see where they need to start looking. I don't know, who shall I throw that to? Who shall I pick? Tao.
Sorry, when you say platforms, you're talking about places that you can learn how to go wide, right?
For
And not the
publication, I'm talking about for publication.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So retailer platforms mostly.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. The simplest method would, if you're going wide, would be to go through something like Draft to Digital. It will collate all your ebook information. They also do print these days as well, and they will send it out to all the retailers. That is the simplest method of getting it out. There are other companies like Publish, Drive, and oh God, I can't remember the others. Draft to Digital is pretty much the leading one in there, and they do it really well. You can also go direct with places like Kobo, Google Play, which I actually really recommend. Google Play does not go through Draft to Digital, so you do need to go direct through them. They are very easy to actually access and upload, so that's quite useful too. You can also go direct Apple, Barnes and Nobles. I don't really recommend those these days. It's a little complicated. Apple, if you don't have an Apple system, it can get a little complicated going through them. For Audible or audiobooks, you're looking at ACX. You should always directly upload through ACX for ACX because they're the biggest audiobook market. Otherwise, Findaway Voices is pretty much the only one that I would recommend in audiobooks at the moment. There are some other small companies, but I wouldn't recommend them. The nice thing about uploading through Findaway Voices, you can get to Spotify now, who is doing a huge push, and they are giving 50% royalties compared to the 25% that you will get from Audible. From ACX directly. For print, you're probably going to go through Ingram Spark, specifically for print only. Do not use them for ebooks. Please, dear God, don't. I know some people do. Don't. There's no reason to use them for ebooks at all. They will cost you money, and their reporting is horrendous. But for print, they are pretty decent. Draft to Digital does do print as well as Lulu and obviously Amazon. I'm going to stop now and let others talk.
Fantastic. Anyone else have anything to add? Go, Rick.
Yeah, I'll chime in and say, yeah, Draft to Digital. I help newbie authors all the time. It's part of what I do with my socials is help young authors. Draft to Digital is the way to go wide, in my opinion, but do not let them distribute to Amazon. Upload directly to Amazon as well. You get a larger slice of the pie. By and large, your majority of your ebook sales will probably happen on Amazon, because when you're talking on socials, that's the first place most people go to look for your book when you mention you have one. But you will get sales from elsewhere. And Draft to Digital also distributes to libraries. They distribute to Kobo, Kobo Plus, all of that. I just let Draft to Digital do everything except Amazon. I don't directly upload to anywhere else except for Google Play. I'll chime in and say that is also a good venue. Google Play also does audiobooks. I don't personally have audiobooks. That is a financial nightmare. If you've never tried to get into financing those, if you've got a big book, start saving for a small car. And then for print, Ingram Spark, absolutely. You can also take the same ISBN and the same content for a paperback or hardcover and simultaneously publish through Amazon. When you do that, Amazon sees that it's the same ISBN and it blocks the distribution feed from Ingram Spark. And all that does is allow customers to print directly in Amazon, and they get their books a little bit quicker. if they're buying over Amazon.
You
But
also get a higher royalty rate.
you do get a higher royalty rate. It's small. It's like an extra 10, 15 cents per book. But if you're buying author copies to go to conventions and signing events, from my experience, every single time I've compared shopping carts, Ingham Spark orders to me are far cheaper, like in the order of a couple $100, depending on the volume you're buying. So I do recommend cross-publishing if your book is small enough. Of the larger books, Amazon is limited to 550 pages for a hardcover. So I do have books that will not publish through Amazon hardcovers. But I personally would not recommend Draft to Digital for paperback. I know people that use it. And the same thing with Lulu. Depending on the size of your book, you can easily fall out of profitability range, and your book will end up being more expensive for the reader than it would be if you were through Ingram Spark. So keep that in mind. And one final thing about going wide, if you're not wide, you won't have to worry about this wholesale discount. Do your research on wholesale discount. It can take a book that you should be able to charge $15 for, and it'll ramp it up to 25 in no time flat, just so that you can earn a small profit just by changing your wholesale discount number.
There were some gems there. Go, Zelda.
Over. And then the only thing I would add is we've kind of mentioned them, but kind of consolidating the, I would say, non-traditional wide ways is serialization apps and things like that. So I think Draft to Digital now goes to Dream, which is a big romance one, but the one that people hear about a lot is Radish, which is a romance serialization platform. Wattpad, which, and Royal Road to a degree, that's more niche, but those are free, but there's ways to monetize that by like using a Patreon or funneling readers. So it's something to think about. Radish pays, so that's a paid serialization place. And then the newest one that's trying to compete is Kindlevella, which is Amazon's response to serialization platform. So there's different rules, and as we talked about, there's different readership that reads serialized. Like a lot of authors that try to chop up books don't really see a lot of success with it because it's like cliffhangers and a different kind of feel, but it is a way to make money wide, and especially on Dream and Radish, you can literally chop up a romance book and still make a decent profit. And Radish now has audiobooks too, so that just things to think about too, depending on your writing style, or if you're like Mel, you came out of the free writing space, there are apps where you can monetize that serialized format.
Okay, thank you, Zelda. Mel, is there anything you want to add?
No, just take it slow, be patient, ask a lot of questions, read all the contracts before you sign them. Read, if you're hitting an extended button in Amazon, to signing up for Smashwords, to understanding, where you're putting your book and even what bank account you're using. Just make sure you're reading thoroughly through everything that you're doing, and sit with the decision for a while. I think people get really excited and go and get into, I gotta put everything out and do everything all at once. You don't. It's probably better if you don't. And like Tao said earlier, taking a step at a time, or taking it a bit at a time and building your platform. Especially if you're going like into different markets, different platforms, different tools for delivery, figuring out, because like the Ingram experience is the exact opposite for someone like me. Like it was actually more expensive to go through Ingram for books my size versus KU. So I don't know if that's because KU is doing their own printing now or what, but it was much cheaper. So but you have to look at the numbers as you're looking at them. Like you have to compare, and everybody has a different, and that's the one thing I've learned. Everybody has a different experience, and that could just be time dependent, dependent on genre, dependent on where they're at, dependent on where they are in the world. It's just, so it can be harrowing, but just patience. I just recommend a lot of patience.
Yeah, it sounds like you need a lot of patience. So I think I would like to put forward the question, and again, we've probably lightly touched on this already, but do you think there would be a time when you should avoid publishing to multiple platforms, in your experience, or is it just more of a personal thing depending on what you're publishing, what genre, what audience you're trying to reach? Shall I put that one to Zelda?
I don't think there's, in my experience, a reason to not publish to multiple platforms. It's more of, as we talked about, ease. Like, even though it's a small cut, when you're not making a ton of sales, that small cut from going direct, which is another term people use, going direct to retailers, to me is worth it. But if you're the type of person that after you've edited, you paid someone, you've done all that, you feel like you'll just never get a book out again. If you have to do that, go do a draft, do digital, do something different. You know what I mean? But I don't think if you want to go wide, I think you're more hurting yourself if you're not putting it out in multiple places to be found, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's actually the advice given in the UK, is always go wide. But what does everyone else think?
I think it's really just going to be genre dependent and individual. There's no set, yes, you should always do that, or no, you should never do that. I think the only time I would say that it really makes no sense is when your books are really short, not to put it in Kindle Unlimited, because you're just not earning very much with the way the payouts are built. Other than that, test it out, see where you're going, and figure out what your strategy is.
I'd say if you're not doing Kindle Unlimited, go wide. It really comes down to that. And for print books, you should probably just, I would, especially with Ingram Spark being free to upload now, just go wide.
Yeah, it also depends on how many hats you want to wear too. Like, so I'm on Amazon and Kobo and Smashwords, which is actually drafted digital now too, so because they merged. But I went through Smashwords first, so I had a lot of people like, well, why don't you handle all those platforms yourself? I was like, I don't have that much brain space. I just finished writing a book, just finished editing, just finished formatting and doing all the things. And I'm like, 3 is about my limit on distribution platforms. And actually I was distributing to Kobo through Smashwords until recently, until Kobo Plus came out. And then that's when I moved to direct, because it made more sense for me to see what that platform's actually doing, versus like, oh, I'm just going to send it through Smashwords and just hope for the best. Like, I wanted more control on that platform. So that's always also a consideration, like how much control do you actually want? Like, I get to libraries through Smashwords too because of the merger with Draft Digital. So I'm pretty happy where I'm at with my ebook distribution. But that could all change in the future depending on who's charging what, how much, royalties or percentages you get out of it. A lot of authors are considering dropping KU because the percentages of royalties have dropped pretty significantly. So there's that concern too. Like, it changes, it literally changes all the time. So you just kind of have to keep on top of it and then consider what you personally want to take on, because it is a business. You have to do your research and also keep your sanity at the same time.
Yeah. And what would you say is the ratio, Mel, of writing in a typical day, of writing to managing all of these different things that you're doing in order to self-publish?
So I have a full-time job.
Oof.
So my writing is usually and a couple of social. So I budget about 2.5 hours a day after work to do creative and social media, and then the weekends is for like publishing platform formatting, because I have large chunks of time to myself. So I'm actually, after this book, I'm taking a pretty significant break because I've been basically on almost a year-long, just trying to get books out the door. But the fact of the matter is that you have to budget time. You have to figure that out. And if you're doing a full-time job, and trying to manage publishing. You basically do what you can as fast as you feel like you can, and that goes back to the patience. You got to be patient with yourself because everything takes time, and you know, keeping a roof over your head and food in your house is a wee bit more important than you know, yeah, because not all of us can go like all in and just be a writer from day one and just be like, oh hey, I'm gonna do this for 2 years and I'm gonna turn it into a profitable thing. It takes time. I've seen even, you know, hybrid and traditional you know, writers, authors take almost like 5, 6, 8 years before they're fully like in the, you know, I'm doing writing full time, I'm an author full time, because it's just that tough. And I don't think people see that a lot. They see a lot of the successes or the immediate successes. And normally, and even in like normal careers, it takes you 10 years to actually get pretty established or and make enough money that you feel like you don't have to have a lot of support. I think that's doubly true for publishing and being an author, is that it takes a long time. So don't, you know, don't get discouraged if you put a book out there and you're not like, oh, I'm not making my paycheck back, you know, or what I spent on it in like the first 3 weeks. You're not going to. I think a lot of people think that will happen. I think it's very rare. And so you have, again, goes back to patience and building your audience and building your backlist. So it has a lot of strategy to it and a lot of time too to build it.
And I just wanted, and I don't think this is romance specific, but something I see in the romance community a lot is that they use like the outlier as the example of what happens. And a lot of people say, why does it take so long to build your audience? And I'm like, people in KU took a long time to build their audience too. Most people were not out the gate making, you know, all-star bonuses, which is like tens of thousands of dollars if you don't know, like, you know, big time money. They took time. Like, even like, especially now I see this in the space a lot, people launch pen names. So you see a book come out and you think this newbie, it has like 1,000 reviews and all this stuff, and it's a established author making a pen name to write in a new genre, right? And so I say all this to say, just, you know, everything takes time, be it KU or wide. It might take you a little bit longer with wide because you have to factor in, you won't see immediate money. A lot of times people see a little bit more money in KU starting out, but it's just going to take time. So don't listen to Rafael's point. Don't listen to the guru that tells you, know, I know the only way, and if you follow my path, you'll be a, you know, successful indie writer overnight. No, no. You know, throw a stone at any author, at Ruby Dixon, who comes to mind. She writes alien romance, and now she's like in published, you know, bookstores and stuff like that for well over a decade. You know, she did not get a book deal, of, you know, 6-figure book deal overnight. So just it takes time, and like any business, you know, they say the 5-year mark is the make or breaker point. Not saying everyone takes 5 years, or you know, some take longer than that, but just don't fall for the guru stick, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think that's right.
The general feedback is it takes 20 books to live on it. As the only kind of guaranteed ratio is if you're writing good quality content, by the time you have 20 books out, that you'll be making enough that you can do just that. Some people make it faster, some people take a lot longer, some people never reach that mark, and it's all okay. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with your writing. It just means readers haven't found you and fell in love yet. Yeah. It just takes time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the case with as you said, Zelda, with both with self-publishing and with traditional publishing. It just seems to be that, you know, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of time, but, you know, that's just part of the course. There may be some other points you want to make, but I just wanted to ask you, in terms of the issue of going wide. You may have already touched on this, but are there any pitfalls in terms of going wide too quickly? I mean, we've pretty much established that going wide is normally a good thing to do, especially if you're in a niche genre. But can anything go wrong apart from, you know, it taking up too much time or perhaps costing too much? Let me put that to well, we'll put it to Rick. Why not?
Well, again, it all depends on genre and where your target readers are and what you're capable of doing for marketing and social media outreach. And if you've got a support team right out of the gates, and you know that your target audience reads predominantly in KU, then you would be missing out on a lot by going wide right away. But I'd say that is not as much the norm depending on certain genres. That's definitely more true in certain flavors of romance. But like fantasy, there were no signs that said, "Hey, Rick, Brandon Sanderson does well in KU. You should put your books on KU." No, that's not a thing for me. So there was nothing. There was no reason for me not to go wide right away. So I did. And a lot of authors I talk to, they're in the same boat. They're writing fantasy, or they're writing thrillers or whatever, and there's nothing that says to them, if you go KU, you'll do better. So they go wide. But that's really the big deciding point. Like I said at the very beginning of this video, is will exclusivity in a free reading program help you? And if yes, then go that route. And if no, then consider wide right away. That's my take.
Yeah. Tao, do you want to add to that?
Not really. I think we've covered all the potential negatives. Time and the mental burden on it is a huge thing. Loss of potential revenue, especially if your audiobooks are the big one, because that 15% drop between having your books exclusive to ACX and being wide is a huge amount, because Audible is a large chunk of the audiobook market right this second. That might change very soon because Spotify is really pushing them on it. Frankly speaking, I expect that there might be a change in the audiobook royalties coming from Audible and ACX too, as they feel the pressure. But that's all speculation. We don't know. So that's potential mental burden, really, because there is a lot to learn. There's things like intricate things like Kobo. You want to go direct because you can get the promotions tab from them, which you cannot access from Draft to Digital. Draft to Digital does get occasional specific promos through them, and so, but there is an ongoing promo tab in Kobo that you can access. So there's small little details, things that you need to learn as you're wide, and that takes a lot of time to get used to and figuring everything out. So I think that mental burden is a big chunk, especially if it's taking away from your most important job as an author, which is writing.
Yeah. And Zelda, do you want to add anything to what's just been said?
Nothing too new, just I think as Mel probably understands, in the romance genre there has been a predominance of go into KU for actual legitimate reasons, financial reasons. There's been romance authors that have made millions, when the program came out, and I'm not joking, like literal millions of dollars. But at the end of the day, I'm of the personal belief that unless you're willing to, as we were talking before this video begins, spend a lot on ads and pump a lot of books out, you're going to pretty much equal out in the end going wide. And in my experience, it's a very specific strategy that does not always work, but when it does work, works very well in the romance genre. But it is a strategy that 9 times out of 10 will lead you to burnout. So I just say, for health and depending on what your long game strategy is, I see no pitfalls of going wide.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. And Mel?
Yeah, I just caution, the gurus definitely, and the platforms that say they're going to solve it all for you, and tend to keep rights. Like if there's something about, oh, we keep this if you publish it here or anything like that, if they don't revert it. One of my hesitations for getting into Ken Novella, because I was test driving the platform when it first came out, was the fact that you couldn't delete your content off the platform. There was no delete button. So that was a concern for me. And so every platform's a little bit different. If you can't have control. That could be a concern for you. Maybe it's not. But I was like, if I can't delete my content, I don't want it to be here, like, because I have no control over it. So, definitely, you just consider things as you're doing. You take small steps and be patient with yourself as you're learning. And because it's a lot. It's not just platforms. It's like typography and cover art, different cover arts worth. Like, I was on web serial cover art looks a lot different than publishing cover art, and you figure that out. And sometimes you can hybrid it, but like the book that I'm doing right now, the cover for it on the web serial platform, completely different, because the platform, the way different readers respond to different covers, it's like, international. Some people will see this as one thing and another thing. It's a context, right? So a lot of it is just trial and error, and a lot of learning, and a lot of luck too. There's some luck elements involved in there too. So mentors are a huge part of it. So I would definitely don't try to do it by yourself.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely by yourself. Like, get with a group, get with somebody that's doing it, make friends with an author that has, at least been doing it for a year or so, to kind of learn the tips, tricks, and traps, because that's going to be important too.
Yeah, that is a lot of things to factor in there. I think we're coming towards the end of the session, but just before I want to put out to you if you've got anything else you want to say. I think we've covered quite a lot, but I just wanted to ask, actually, Tao, I noticed that do you have your own publishing house? You're putting things out through your own publishing house, is that right?
Yeah, it's basically mostly on my work, or my co-author's work. So it's just a separate company that I put out for tax, that I use for tax reasons and ease of
Do you have one as
sales
well?
and things, promotions. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I was just trying to figure out if there was any particular relevance for that, and if you'd learned anything from it, with regards to what we're talking about right now. But you sound like you know a lot anyway. So.
Not really. I mean, it's mostly a tax thing. Having a separate company and being able to hire employees or contractors through that and taking things like that. So it's not whether or not you have a company or a publishing house officially, or if you're doing it directly from your own small business accounts, it doesn't make a difference for going wide.
Okay.
And I have the same thing. I have Airline Press LLC.
Yeah.
Again, I do it for taxes, and sometimes if you're going to do signing events and shows, or like little markets, like farmers markets will let you buy a table space. Some of them require business insurance, so then it's actually easier to get into some of those markets if you have an LLC. But other than that, I mean, you don't have to have it to go wide.
Yeah. Okay. So before we finish up, guys, I just want to ask: is there anything else with regards to going wide that, I mean, we've gone into quite a lot of detail. It's obviously it's a big topic, but is there anything that you really want to get across to all the viewers before we close up? I'm getting a sense that we've covered it all. Excellent stuff. And I would like, I would very much like it if you could, if there's anything you want to talk about in terms of forthcoming books or any dates, it would be great if you could take the time to mention that now. So shall we start with you, Zelda? What have you got planned? What's on the agenda?
So thank you so much for attending this panel. This is so awesome. So happy to be here for my second Right Hive. If you want a free book, you can check out, I can always never figure out the direction, Zephyr's Curse, which is a free book you get for signing up for my newsletter on my website, Zelda Knight, .com. And also, if you want to listen to any free audiobooks, you can go to my YouTube channel at Authors Ignite, and you can check out free romance books.
Brilliant. Thanks, Zelda. Rick?
I don't have anything big right now. I'm currently taking a break from publishing new books because I'm trying to finish the main series for Bathed in the Blood of Ravens. So the second book in that series is in editing right now. The third book is in progress. And my current goal is to write the remainder of the five and then do a staggered release over the next year.
Great stuff. We'll look
So.
forward to that. Mel?
Yeah, my next book is Princess Tide. It's going to be out May 25th, right in time for the Disney hoopla for all the mermaid stuff. So it's a gay mermaid merfolk romance. It's set in contemporary, and it's yeah, it's going to be out May 25th, and then I'm going to take a break after this one comes out and start getting back into the creative space a little bit and then probably publish my next book at the March next year, which will be the third book in a series called Saint George Chronicles that features dragons. So yeah, that's me, and yeah, just looking forward to hearing everybody's comments and chatting with folks after this session. So
thanks, Mel. And Tao?
Hi, thanks for coming to the panel. I'm currently working on book 9 of my 1,000 Leagues series, which you can see right above there. That's the book 1. You can also get a whole bunch of free books by signing up to my website or short stories. And you can see what I've written at starletpublishing.com, which is the publishing website that we just discussed. As well as all the co-authors that I work with, where we write in my universes. And that book 9 should come out probably about September of this year.
Great stuff. Well, thank you ever so much for coming on, giving your time and your expertise. It just sounds well, to me at least, it sounds very complicated. But I think you've done a great job at explaining and breaking down all the different parts of the process. And it's great that there's these Facebook groups and that people like Rick are giving advice, and I'm sure you're all doing that to other newbie writers. I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed with you guys. I find this very impressive. So thank you very much for your time. And let's see what questions we're going to get thrown and if we can answer them. But thank you very much. Thank you.